Well, welcome everybody. We're going to start by lighting our chalice. Can't say this and we light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, a faith that calls us together to the sacred community that is Unity Church-Unitarian, where in recognition of the holiness of the interconnected web of all life and the inherent worth of every being, we commit again to working within, among, and beyond ourselves to make reality justice, wholeness, and equity for all people, for the earth, and for all life on it. So we have enjoyed this amazing potluck. Thank you, everybody, for I'm so full and I don't want to stop anyway. We'll have to do this again. I didn't bring my recipe, but if anybody wants it, you can talk to me. I have it on my phone. So we're going to introduce our speakers from Fork to Forest presentation. We have, is it Anna or Anna? Anna. We have a lot of Annas and Annas around this place. So Anna Larsson spends her days working on strategy and finance in the corporate world. By night, she's a longtime climate and environmental activist. She lives with her partner and 2 teenagers in Minneapolis and loves biking and getting out in nature. And also we have Nicola Philpott. She runs a plant-based meal program at a shelter for people experiencing homelessness in Minneapolis. She has a doctorate in biochemistry and molecular biology and has written peer-reviewed science publications. Nicola enjoys gardening, biking with her teenagers, and walking her dogs. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, everyone. And please don't hesitate to go get more food while we're talking. And if everyone agrees, we can also just take an intermission at some point and like go refill your plates and then come back and eat. So like I'm open to all of that. So this talk is about why we can't solve the climate crisis without changing how we eat. And there'll be time for discussion at the end. So I'd like to start with a challenge question to get us started. What percentage of all the mammals on Earth, the mammal mass on Earth, if you weighed all of the mammals, what percent do you think are wild? Any guesses? Yeah, less than half. Yeah, okay, good guess. Anyone else want to venture a guess? 20%, 10%. Okay, let's see. Turns out it's 4%. So humans make up a third of all the biomass, all the mammalian biomass on the planet, and our livestock make up almost 2/3. So that leaves just 4% for wild mammals. And then if you cut out the whales, the ocean mammals like whales and dolphins, we're down to just 2%. So just 2% of all the land mammals on Earth are wild. And it's a similar story for birds. 70% of all the avian biomass on the planet is farmed poultry. So our meat and dairy habit is gobbling up land, causing the extinction of wild animals, contributing to climate change, and squandering resources. Half of US land is dedicated to animal agriculture. It's our food habits that are the major cause of species extinction and a huge contributor to environmental degradation. All right, so now I'll just tell you a little bit more about my story. Elena already introduced me. I just want to add, though, that I am an animal lover. And when I was 13, I became vegetarian. And then 15 years ago, I became fully plant-based. So I stopped eating dairy and eggs as well. And since then, I've been doing research on our food system and its impact on the world. And I was shocked at what I learned. I thought, I'm an environmentalist. I read the newsletters, I sign the petitions. How could I not have known about this? So this talk is my way of sharing some of what I've learned.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola Philpott. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm originally from the UK. I moved to Minneapolis 17 years ago when I got a job at the University of Minnesota. And I worked there for several years, and then I took a career break to have children. My original plan was to go back to teaching after they started school. But while I was at home looking after my kids, I learned about climate change and soon realized that climate change was the biggest threat to my children. And so instead of going back to teaching, I decided to become a full-time volunteer for climate organizations. And so for a number of years, I've been a group leader for my local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and I've been a volunteer for other climate and environmental organizations too. Our talk today is not affiliated with any of the groups that we volunteer for. I'm here because I hear a lot of concern about climate change and people wondering what they can do in their own personal lives to reduce their personal carbon footprint. And what I can say is that of all the climate actions that I've taken in the past 8 years, one of the definitely the cheapest, the easiest, and one of the most effective has been to reduce my meat, dairy, and egg consumption and transition towards plant-based eating. It also aligns with my values. When I found out that it takes 4 times as much land to provide food for a meat-eating person versus a plant-based eater, it was pretty clear to me that I should transition to plant-based eating. And if most of us did this, it would free up a lot of land, so we'd be able to rewild, reforest, and increase our biodiversity. So what we're going to do today is Anna's going to talk about the connection between climate change and food, and then I'm going to talk about how I transition from eating meat every day to eating all plants.
Great. Thanks, Nicola. So this talk is about climate change. So I'm going to start with a show of hands. Who uses a zero carbon energy source? Like maybe you have solar panels or you've signed up for wind energy. Excellent. Yeah, a lot of you. Okay, good. And how about who drives an electric car or a hybrid? Quite a few. Excellent. All right, challenge question. Who has a heat pump? Excellent. I love to see that. Excellent. Great. That's great. And we need to be doing all of those things. And in this presentation, we're going to be making the case for why you should become a reducitarian. That is, you should eat less meat, a lot less, to help fight climate change. And we aren't talking about Meatless Monday levels of reduction, because that's not going to cut it. The Lancet is the British equivalent of the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's a respected, thoroughly peer-reviewed scientific journal. And a few years ago, they commissioned a study to determine how humans should be eating for healthy bodies and a healthy planet. And what they found is that Americans are eating 6 times our fair share of meat. So that's why I say that Meatless Mondays aren't going to cut it. And instead, we need to flip it and make it Meaty Mondays, just 1 day a week of eating meat. And you don't have to change your life and become vegan. Reducing your meat consumption and leaving the occasional animal-based product on your plate is a huge help. So I'm not trying to take away your bacon or your cheese Danish or whatever it is that you really love. I'm just saying, keep the animal foods that you really love in your diet and try substituting other things for the ones that you're just eating out of habit. So if you put chicken breast on your salad, try putting chickpeas on instead. And if you go reducitarian, you'll be in good company. It turns out that about 30% of Americans are already making changes to their diet to try to fight climate change. So now let's start by talking about the climate impact of our diet, that is, its greenhouse gas impact. If we were to electrify everything right now, this evening, but not change how we eat, we'd still be on track for over 2 degrees Celsius of warming. In order to meet our climate goals, we've got to change how we eat. And agriculture accounts for about a quarter of direct global emissions, and animal agriculture accounts for more than half of that. And while we are figuring out ways to reduce our emissions from other sectors, so think about renewable energy or electric vehicles, our food production system remains stubbornly hard to impact. The emissions just keep going up. And if everyone were to adopt a plant-rich, low animal product, reducitarian way of eating, we could cut our emissions from the food sector almost in half. And that's not enough to get us all the way to where we need to be, but it is the biggest lever we can pull in the food system. So keep reducing your food waste, but to have the biggest impact on your emissions, stop eating meat, or at least reduce it. All right, so it's time for another challenge question. If you were to compare the CO2 that's released for each pound used, how carbon intensive is a pound of beef compared to burning a pound of coal? Any guesses? 100 to 1, okay. Anyone else want to guess? Beef to coal, yeah. Yeah, beef is 100 times more. What's that? 51 to 1, yeah. No, those are excellent guesses. It turns out 40 to 1. That's still a gigantic number. So eating a pound of beef is 40 times more carbon intensive than, or CO2 equivalent intensive than burning a pound of coal. And it's not just about beef. A pound of shrimp costs us 10 times more carbon than coal, and cheese is 9 times. Pork and chicken are 4 or 5 times. So can you imagine that? Your family's chicken dinner is the equivalent of burning 10 pounds of dirty coal. And by comparison, a pound of lowly dried peas, which are another great protein source, emits just 1/3 the amount of carbon as coal. So all in, animal agriculture accounts for about 20% of greenhouse gas emissions, and cow burps make up half of the climate impact of beef, for example, and land use is the other half of the problem. And the total impact also includes deforestation, soil degradation, manure management, fertilizer for feed crops, and then there's the machinery and the transportation and the processing and the refrigeration that also needs to occur along the life cycle chain. What this tells us is we have to stop eating so much meat. So when you eat animal products, go ahead and make sure that they're sustainably raised, but much more importantly, eat much less of them. And again, I'm not talking meatless Monday less, I'm talking a lot less. And now let's talk about land use and its impact on the carbon in our atmosphere. About half of what is now grazing land was forest in the year 1800, and that percentage is higher the further back in time you go. So it's not fair to say that animals are just grazing on land that we wouldn't be using for anything else anyway. Forests soak up a quarter of all of the carbon that we emit, and that's why deforestation is such a disaster for our climate. It's causing emissions now from when we cut down the trees and then we burn the undergrowth, and it's stopping those trees from absorbing carbon in the future. Ultimately, we need to leave more of the earth alone to do its thing, to capture carbon. So Earlier, we talked about some of the steps that you're taking to reduce your personal carbon footprint. So things like driving an EV or using rooftop solar. If you're taking steps to reduce your personal carbon footprint, eating much less meat and dairy should be high on your list of actions. So please reduce your flights and switch to an EV and install rooftop solar if it's in your budget. And for goodness sake, eat less meat. And the great news about reducing your animal product consumption is that you can start doing it right now. We've all just eaten this delicious vegan food, so you know that it's delicious and doable. You don't have to wait another minute to make a huge reduction in your carbon footprint. And another point worth remembering is that if you live with other people, switching your whole household to reducitarian can have 2 or 3 or 4 times that impact, and that really adds up. So now let's move on from climate change and carbon dioxide emissions and discuss other ways that animal agriculture is damaging the earth. Time for another quiz question. What percent of all the grain grown in the US is used for direct human consumption? Any guesses? 5%. Ooh, you guys are catching on. Well, it turns out it's less than 10%. So most of the grains that we grow are used to feed animals. So those amber waves of grain that we sing about, it's for government subsidized chicken feed. If we stopped eating so many animals, we could grow less grain and be able to return more land to nature. And then on top of this, the monocultures and associated chemicals that are used to cultivate the enormous amount of animal feed we require are hurting our planet in other ways. Among other things, it's leading to a decline in our insect populations. Insect levels have declined 70% since 1990. And now let's talk about deforestation. You won't be surprised to learn that cattle ranching is the biggest cause of deforestation in the Amazon. 75% of Brazil's deforestation is driven by cattle ranching, and this meat gets exported all over the world. But in the US, big agriculture has made it illegal to require a country of origin label on that meat, so you won't know if you're buying meat from deforested land. But the US imports over 1 billion pounds of beef from Brazil annually, so chances are good that if you know someone who eats beef, you know someone who's contributed to the destruction of the Amazon. And now let's talk about freshwater use. Beef uses a lot of water. How many daily showers equal the water that's used for 1/4 pound hamburger? Any guesses? 27. Oh, I like that. I like the precision of that. 250. All right. Dale goes for the extremes. So it turns out you could shower every day for 6 weeks to equal the amount of water that it takes to produce a 1/4 pound hamburger. And that's not even a big hamburger by American standards. Make it a double, add some special sauce, a couple of slices of cheese, and you're approaching 6 months of showers. And I should point out, it's not that farm animals are incredibly thirsty. Most of the water that's needed for animal production is actually used to grow crops. So just like in this picture, you can see these. A lot of the crops are grown on land that needs to be heavily irrigated. Half of the water that's used to support an American's lifestyle is used for meat and dairy. So whatever steps you take at home to conserve water, whether it's, turning off the tap when you're brushing your teeth or not watering your lawn, those steps pale in comparison to the amount of fresh water used for 1 meal's worth of meat. All right, so let's turn to Minnesota to talk about water pollution, or water pollution, as I like to call it. We have 50 million farm animals in Minnesota. They're mostly in CAFOs. Those are confined animal feeding operations or intensive factory farms. We have 2 million cows and 9 million pigs and lots of chickens and turkeys. And a cow makes 25 times the poop of a human, and a pig makes 10 times the waste of a human. And in Minnesota, our farm animals create as much manure as almost 100 million people. And have you ever heard of a sewer for animal waste? No, that's not a thing. Animal waste is stored in lagoons, like those purple ponds, and sprayed on nearby fields. But the land can't absorb such an intense amount of nutrients, and the excess ends up running off into streams and rivers and polluting the water table below ground. And I'd like to give you a sense of scale. So in Minnesota, the current law says that you can open up a factory farm with up to 1,000 cows as a matter of course. Any farmer can do that on their land. They don't need a special permit. And the size of a lagoon that's needed to accommodate the waste from that many animals is the equivalent to 3.5 football fields. So now picture 3.5 football fields covered in cow waste. That's pretty gross, right? But there's one more thing. That lagoon needs to be 18 feet deep. And that's what's needed for 1,000 cows. But we have 2 million cows in our state. So we have 2,000 of these gigantic lagoons spread across our state. And that's just for cows. Our pigs require more than twice that number. And then on top of that, we have the waste from all those chickens and turkeys as well. The amount of animal waste we're talking about from factory farms just in Minnesota blows your mind. And you may have heard about the unsafe drinking water in the driftless part of our state in southeastern Minnesota. And this is due to the very high amount of nitrogen coming from intensive animal agriculture in that region. And this is a problem that exists throughout the state because those factory farms and crop monocultures are everywhere. 96% of farming counties in Minnesota have nitrogen runoff above recommended levels, making their drinking water unsafe. Almost every single county in our farming county in our state has unsafe drinking water. And the pollution doesn't stop at our borders. The excess nutrients change the ecology of rivers, causing mass fish die-offs. And when the polluted rivers meet the ocean, the excess nutrients cause massive algae blooms that kill ocean life. And I want to be clear, I don't blame our farmers. I blame our ever more powerful industrial agriculture system. Farmers today are beholden to the enormous power that these companies have. And farmers feel like they can't farm the way they have for generations before and the way they'd like to. The current industrial agriculture system demands that farmers participate in intensive animal agriculture. Now we'll leave the land and look at our oceans. We're emptying our oceans at an alarming rate. Time for a guess. What portion of large ocean fish that we had 100 years ago do we still have in our oceans today? Any guesses? How much? 2%, 60, 10%, 60%. Okay, yeah, like nobody knows, right? How would you know? So it turns out we have just 1/3 the population of large ocean fish that we had 100 years ago. And if you're thinking, oh, 1/3, like that's not so bad. We've been looking at much more dire numbers than that in some of these other comments or some of these other quizzes. But I'd like you to imagine that you're in a stadium and the show is completely sold out. There are people in every seat. It's a vibrant and lively atmosphere, and everyone's having a good time. And then 2/3 of the people disappear. Your nearest neighbor is now 3 seats down. The stadium has become a pretty sad and lonely place. It's no longer so full of life. This is the state of our oceans today. And then here's a chart from England that shows the decline in the quantity of fish brought back. All right, I'm going to take this for a moment. And so this line shows you the number of fish that have been brought back over time. And the area in blue is the time period when bottom trawlers were used for fishing. So those are giant nets that are scraped along the bottom of the ocean floor, and they pull up everything in their path. And so you can see, we were getting lots of fish, and then it plummets. So in England, they decided, okay, well, maybe we need to stop using bottom trawlers. Okay, so 1980, they stopped using bottom trawlers. But look, the ocean fish population hasn't rebounded in the 40 years since bottom trawlers stopped being used. So you can see the irreparable harm that overfishing can cause our oceans. And then there's ocean pollution. You've probably heard about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. 80% of it is made up of fishing nets and other garbage from commercial fishing and aquaculture. So you can't avoid damaging the earth by switching from eating land animals to eating sea animals. So there you have it. We've made our case for why you need to eat a lot less animal-based food. I have not seen a single credible climate scientist who says, yeah, we can keep eating as much meat as we always have. The earth can handle it. That study doesn't exist. And I hope that you're now thinking about changes that you can make to your own diet to make it more earth-friendly. But if you're like many people, this feels like a big ask. You might be wondering if you can negotiate this a little bit. How about if I just... So, let's get into that. How about if I just eat sustainably harvested fish? I'll look for the Monterey Bay Aquarium label, then I'll be okay. Let's talk about what sustainably fished means. So I did a deep dive on this issue as I was preparing this talk. We've lost 2/3 of our large ocean fish over the last 100 years. And the sustainable label just means that we aren't losing more of the targeted commercial fishing species being studied. So think things like tuna or cod. It doesn't mean that we're building those populations back up again. And it also doesn't mean, or it doesn't take into account the health of our ocean ecosystems as a whole. So it's just a commercial fishing term that counts the fish that people like to eat. And the populations of large marine mammals and large ocean fish, things like sharks and rays that aren't commercially fished, but that are slow to grow, are plummeting at this level of fishing. And here's a story that I find telling. In the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, after the Deepwater Horizon massive oil spill disaster, the fish populations actually increased. And this is because commercial fishing was halted temporarily. So how badly are we overfishing our oceans if a huge, tragic, toxic oil spill is better for ocean life than our current levels of fishing? And I've just given examples for ocean fish, but our freshwater fish are experiencing similar declines. If you cut out land animal meat and just switch your protein consumption to fish, you're pushing our fish stocks over the limit. There is no capacity to take more fish out of the ocean without causing the number of fish to decline further. What about if I just eat grass-fed meat and dairy? I need to tell you, there just isn't enough land for our current appetite of meat and dairy if this is how we're going to raise it. If all American beef were raised with grass-fed methods, it would take more land than we have in the entire United States. And that's just for beef. The math for switching to grass-fed or regenerative farming, but not changing the quantity we eat, just doesn't work out. And regenerative agriculture does hold some promise for sequestering carbon, but the animals raised on the typical regenerative farm actually emit more greenhouse gases than that farm sequesters. Project Drawdown has said that restoring ecosystems and rewilding land has a much larger carbon storage potential than regenerative agriculture. And do you know what else? In the US, our per capita consumption of meat has increased 60% since 1961. And even since the year 2000, our per capita meat consumption has gone up 25%. I'm looking around this room. I bet almost all of you can remember the year 2000. It wasn't that long ago. We just keep upping our consumption of meat, and our planet is suffering for it. So if you're going to eat meat, then go ahead and get your meat from a regenerative farm, but make sure you reduce your consumption of meat by a lot. Please understand that eating food from a regeneratively farmed animal pastures doesn't give you a free pass to keep eating animal products at the same rate that Americans are accustomed to. What about if I just go vegetarian? Eliminating meat, but keeping dairy in the picture certainly helps. But remember, cows are a big emitter of methane. In the US, they're the single largest emitter of methane, beating out natural gas by a lot. Plus, they're the water and poop issues that we've already discussed. And let's talk about the water that's needed for milk. It takes 630 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of milk. And to help you picture this, picture the Fauché Tower in downtown Minneapolis. Like, I know it's not a skyscraper by today's standards, but still, it's a pretty tall building. You wouldn't want to have to climb up all those stairs. A stack of 630 one-gallon jugs of water would be taller than the Fauché Tower. That is how much water is needed to produce 1 gallon of milk. And you may remember a few years ago when the water shortage in California caused restaurants to only serve tap water on request. They'd be better off just taking Greek yogurt off of store shelves. If your morning just wouldn't be complete without a little cream in your coffee, don't sweat that small amount of dairy. Just understand that cutting out meat but adding in more cheese and yogurt is of limited environmental benefit. Isn't the problem really overpopulation? No, that's really not the problem. Our agriculture system produces over twice as many calories as all the humans on the planet need. The problem is that we're feeding a lot of those calories to animals. Thinking about cereal production, in the US, we talked about how only 10% of the grains is fed to it goes to direct human consumption. And over half of the grains are fed directly to animals. And if you're noticing that the numbers don't add up to 100%, you're right, that biofuels account for about 1/3 of our cereal production as well, which is a problem of its own. And so going down this path a little further, just 3% of the calories we feed to cows end up as beef. That's a huge amount of inefficiency, just 3%. And you know I love to pick on cows, so let's look at other animals. For chicken, which is the best of the bunch, just 13% of the animal feed calories that end up, that they're fed to chickens end up on your plate as chicken. So that's a lot of loaves of bread and cartons of soy milk that go into producing each serving of meat that you eat. So if we cut back, way back, on our consumption of animal products, we'd be able to feed everyone on the planet and return a lot of land to nature. It's important to remember, eating fewer animal products doesn't have to be all or nothing. Going reducitarian is just fine. So many respected scientific journals have published studies saying that we're eating way too much meat for a healthy planet. We all need to cut back on our meat consumption, way more than just meatless Mondays. Instead, we need to shoot for meaty Mondays, 1 day a week of eating meat. So now I'm going to turn over to Nicola, who will lead a discussion of how you can start eating more plants.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, I'm going to talk about how I transitioned from eating meat every day to eating all plants. So when I first became aware of the climate crisis, I rushed out and I bought a share in my local community solar garden, and that provides all the electricity for my home. And I went to DC to advocate for effective climate legislation. And a bit of time after that, I organized a solar array at my kids' school, and I also went vegan. And since then, I've bought an electric vehicle, an induction stove, and a heat pump to heat and cool my home. And we should all do all of these things if they're in our budget, but many of them cost a lot of money. And so what I can say is the cheapest, easiest, quickest, and one of the most effective climate actions that I've taken is to reduce my meat consumption and transition towards plant-rich eating. So where did I start? I did actually start with meatless Mondays, despite what Anna said. And when I suggested meatless Mondays to my husband, he said something like, "Sure, I'd be happy to eat a big salad every Monday night." I was concerned about this. Despite all the delicious salads that we have here tonight, if I eat a salad for dinner, a couple of hours later, I'm very hungry. I'm eating junk food and looking for snacks and things like that. So I wanted to find something a bit more substantial to eat. So I looked at the food that I was already cooking. And one of those meals was chicken curry. And instead of making it with chicken, I switched the chicken for chickpeas. And so every Monday night, we're having some kind of a chickpea curry. And this was so straightforward that it soon evolved to also include a mixed bean chili every Thursday night and a tofu stir fry every Saturday night. I make a lot of food, freeze some down, eat some the next day. And so with these 3 simple switches, my husband and I have halved the amount of meat that we're eating. But we don't live in isolation. We have friends and family, and they come over for dinner. Many of our family eat meat to some extent. And so when they come over for a grill out in the summer, we're making Impossible burgers, Beyond Brats, lots of grilled vegetables, potato salad, fruit salad, and all the food is plant-based, and everyone really loves the food. We also have a couple of kids. Our kids are now teenagers, and famously, teenagers eat a lot. So it's important that I make food that they really like. So I make things like a vegan shepherd's pie, lentil sloppy joes, minestrone, black bean burritos, curried tofu, things like that. And they really like the food. And so this evening, I brought along a bunch of our family favorite recipes. They're up on the tall table over there. You're welcome to take as many recipes as you want and try them out at home. I also included the cookbook or the website where I got those recipes. And so you can do your own exploring and find your own favorite recipes. So having said that, initially I made some very simple switches to remove some meat from my diet and increase the sort of legumes, the meat alternatives that I was eating. It's really worth looking at what vegan chefs are doing, because they really have magical ways of making the food tasty and sort of sustaining. And so these are some of mine and Anna's favorite cookbooks. that we'd recommend. You can give it a try, look for them in the library or something. I looked at transitioning to plant-rich eating as a sort of adventure and trying new foods and new recipes and new techniques in the kitchen. And it's really helped me to think about food more broadly. So instead of thinking about meat as the centerpiece of the meal and vegetables as kind of secondary to that, like a meat and potato sort of meal, I'm thinking about and making lots of food from around the world. So lots of stews and stir fries and curries and casseroles and pasta bakes, things like that. And many of these kinds of recipes, they don't contain any meat in the first place. But if they do, it's very easy to switch out that meat and replace it with a legume or a bean or chickpea or tofu or some of these fake meat alternatives that you can get in the grocery store now. And you can do that without the dish losing any of its original flavor. So speaking about these meat alternatives, whether they're the fake meats that you can get in the grocery store or whether it's just a bean or a pea or a lentil or something like that, they are high in protein. But it turns out we don't need a lot of protein for a healthy diet. This kind of protein craze is a little bit hyped up. What we need is 0.36 grams per pound of our body weight. That's about 50 grams or 2 ounces of protein per day. We can get protein from all of the plants that we eat, as long as we eat a good variety of fruit, vegetables, and grains. We can get all the amino acids we need. And the amount of protein that we eat is something that I don't worry about for myself or my kids. I know we're getting enough. Something we might all want to think a bit more about is the amount of fiber we're eating, because it turns out that more than 90% of us aren't eating enough fiber. And fiber is only in fruits, veg, and grains. It's not in any animal products. So if we want to eat more fiber, we have to eat more plants. So I want to talk a little bit about community, because when we're making some changes in life, it's much easier to do that if there are people around us that are doing the same thing or that have done it before. And I live in the Eden Prairie in the west suburbs. And when I moved here a couple of years ago, when I moved out there a couple of years ago, there wasn't much going on. There's a lot going on in the Twin Cities in terms of plant-based eating and vegan food, but there wasn't much going on out there. So I started to organize my monthly potlucks at Unmapped Brewing Company in Minnetonka. The next one, and I'm going to invite you all to come along. It's a week on Tuesday, October the 7th, starting at 6:30. Everyone brings a dish, we all share the food, and it's just a fantastic, friendly community event. You can share recipes, share ideas, and you can get a pint of beer if you want. The thing I really want to stress is that there are lots of people out there that are trying to reduce the amount of meat, dairy, and eggs that they're eating and increase the amount of plants that they're eating. And that can be for a whole variety of reasons. Often it's for health reasons, or it can be for social justice, environmental, ethical, climate change reasons. And so you'll meet a whole variety of people at different stages of their sort of plant-based journey. And what I usually do at this point in my talk is to recommend that you guys organize your own potluck, but ta-da, you've already done it. And it's fantastic. The food is really good here. So I would encourage you to do it again, do it every month or something, and make your own plant-based community here at the church. Okay, I want to talk about a project that we started about 18 months ago at the beginning of 2024. And it's in collaboration with Simpson Housing Services in Minneapolis, which is a shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And we collaborate with them to provide the guests and the staff with plant-based meals. So 2 or 3 times a month, we go to the kitchen. I plan the menu and get the food, and then 4 or 5 of us gather in the kitchen to make the food and serve the food to the guests and the staff. And then we sit down and we eat the food with the guests, and it's a really fun community event. I will encourage you to come and join us in the kitchen if you'd like to. We're doing it, we usually do a lunch, but it can be during the week or at weekends. What you find is if you're cooking for a lot of people, there are lots of dietary preferences, allergies, intolerances. And at the moment, there are a number of vegetarians. There are people that won't eat pork. There are people that are lactose intolerant. There's some people that won't eat fish or shellfish. And so if you're going to make food for a lot of people, you can either make different dishes for each preference, or you can make a universal meal that everyone can eat. And that universal meal is plant-based. So looking forward to next year, we're raising funds to provide 3 meals a month next year. The potluck next week on October the 7th, described in this flyer, is actually a fundraiser. It's free to come along to the event, to the potluck. It's free to eat the food, but there'll be a raffle, and $1 from every pint sold will go towards our plant-based meal program at Simpsons. And also there is going to be a food drive. So we're collecting cans of chickpeas and tomatoes and beans and pasta and things like that, so that we can use that food to cook meals at Simpsons too. I'm also encouraging environmental groups like yourselves to come along. You can come along as a whole group to come to the kitchen and make some food. And also high school students have started to come along and join us in the kitchen. And, you know, high school students, they like to get some volunteer hours. So this started off with Anna's son in the top wearing his hairnet. And then my 2 sons down below have just started to help out in the kitchen too. And they really enjoy helping. It's quite an active sort of busy volunteering opportunity for them. So we welcome students to come to the shelter too. Okay, this is my last slide. I want to end by saying that according to Project Drawdown, the 2 most effective actions that we can take to reduce our carbon footprint are 1, reduce our food waste, and 2, to transition towards plant-rich eating. And many youth and teenagers are are transitioning towards plant-rich eating as perhaps their first climate action. It's really important to me that as a climate activist that we encourage this first climate action. It's also important to me as a parent of teenagers that we encourage and support their choices. And so right now, Minnesota Plant-Based Kids are advocating for a plant-based meal option in schools. And this is not taking away any of the current meals that they provide. It's just saying that if there is a child that's vegan or vegetarian or wants to try plant-based food, then the school will have something available for them to eat. At the moment, my kids don't have a hot meal at school. They take food from home. And so if you're interested in this campaign, a bill has actually been introduced, and we just need to have a hearing for it. So if you want to support this campaign, then let me know and I can put you in touch with Minnesota Plant-Based Kids. Okay, now I'm going to hand back to Anna, and she's going to talk about how you can be an ally.
Great, thank you, Nicola. So it's important to remember this isn't just about you and your personal consumption. We need to rapidly transition to a world where eating meat and dairy 2 or 3 times a day is not the norm. And here are some things you can do beyond your own kitchen. Talk to people about why you are reducing your consumption of animal products. Share some of the information from this presentation that you find compelling. Just like other aspects of fighting climate change or changing systems, talking to other people about the problems with our current habits brings them into public consciousness and opens the door for change to occur. Let your elected representatives know that this issue matters to you. And lend your voice to the campaigns of others. Big Ag receives billions in subsidies each year, and you can bet that they're fighting hard to keep that government money flowing. So sign those petitions and write those letters. Support plant-based initiatives for school lunches, for hospital meals, in your office, or right here in your church. You don't have to do it all, but advocate in the places that matter to you, and then support others who are leading the charge. And finally, order plant-based meals in restaurants. Restaurants and our dining companions need to know about the choices we're making and why. There are many reasons to switch to a plant-rich diet. Planetary health, your own personal health, and the ethics of how farm animals are treated. And these are just a few suggestions to get you started if you are interested in learning more. Eating more plants is not controversial. There's not a doctor in the world who will tell you that you can eat too many plants. And there's not an environmentalist in the world who will tell you that we're growing too many plants for human consumption. That's not a thing. For us to live in a sustainable world, this shift to more plant-based eating is inevitable. Just like we need to electrify our homes and vehicles and severely cut back on our use of fossil fuels, switching to a low-meat, reducitarian diet is equally an absolute requirement for a livable planet. And it's easy to be part of the solution. So the next time you're planning your dinner or you're shopping for the week, I challenge you to include some meatless, fully plant-based meals in your plan. Start with a single step, but start. So now I'm going to encourage everybody to go back for seconds, get some dessert, all of that, and then we'll come back and we can have a Q&A period. But there's so much delicious food left. Everybody should definitely go and get some of that before we continue.
Hi. I brought along a bunch of these, the current issue of Minnesota Veg Living. Anna and I both have articles in this magazine, so you're welcome to you're welcome to take one along with you. It's free.
We've got your average times. It just blows. Yeah.
Yeah, and you like, this is super interesting. So oh, I know. I just haven't seen this.
So this graphic, it's easy to get to do like the 20 actions possible. They're really
In this country, there were 11 vehicles because
oh yeah.
but this is worldwide. That's worldwide down here, and then this is worldwide.
Yeah, and I totally find data list. But I can see the data that I can.
Oh, that's pretty good for wanted to do something. Stations that are, once we started using this system. Right. So we're in this.
I'm vegan sister, been vegan since high school. My brother, chef at Disneyland. I was yeah, I mean, we have like a just like that. Just like this. Just like, some of the staff.
You did, yeah, yeah, or, yeah.
I'm very positive. There.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, people that are- Anyway, yes, we French teenage girl, British officer kids, ancient doctors that we scared. I know. And it was like one of the puppets on the muffin. Doctors. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Numbers, this is like the very first time that it's on, so some of the numbers, you know, might be.
We get stuff over here. So, yeah, so the conversation. You know, what? You spoke, it sounded like a pencil. And lifted the Irish.
Yeah, that's impressive. So good. How often do you do those use this? Oh, yeah, it's just online.
Well, yeah, I just feel. So I've got 100. A lot more forward in my outfit. You know, environmental reform. You know, or urban farming, grow all your own food. So I got to say, we're going to start getting a lot of stress. You get $150 off the fence month here.
Wow.
Yeah. So. No, I dug, me and the guy have 300 linear feet of French, and they got a grant, very the year after, then, right, it's going to freeze the next day. So we got this, and we dug it, shoot it, and we got 300 2.8 by 6-inch trenches, running on the back ones. And so we're running by day, so like, all of our. So anyway. So I got 20 people in my head screaming at me. Baking soda. Baking soda. Last baking soda.
So all your tenants live in one building.
No, we have 14 buildings. So I got a little super village in Kelly Park. I put her in spots so long. We had 9 buildings, or 8 buildings. Sorry. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to grow food and. Yeah. I never. I need something to waste in the world. Maybe the choke very possible.
You know, you can.
Some other kind of help. Unfortunately, I'll get one. Really Everbearing, if you want raspberry, I've got a raspberry plant for you. They're everbearing raspberries that produce from June through November. Those crops. It just keeps pumping them out. It's crazy.
Wow.
And they spread like. So if you want the young, long lasting, very productive raspberries, let me know. I've got a ton of plants.
Okay.
So they just propagate, so I just
Yeah.
give them away to people.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right. I think we're going to do Q&A now. So
cool. I'm gonna sit down.
yeah, get some dessert. All right. We're going to do Q&A. So thank you, everyone. And if there are questions, I'd be happy to pass the mic and then we'll do our best to answer them. Any questions? And it's okay if you know everything already. Oh, favorite cookbook.
Definitely Issa Does It. Oh, are you familiar with that one? Let me go back. Oh, there we go. That's my all-time favorite. Issa Does It. And then this is another Issa book. Vegan Cookies Invade Your Cookie Jar. They're my two favorites. What are your favorites?
Oh my goodness. I'm not prepared for that question. I use a lot of blogs. Oh, yes. All right. Gail has a suggestion. Oh, a question. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I get a mic. Woohoo.
But yes.
So my question is, you two ladies are absolutely fabulous. How can we engage with the two of you more? Hopefully you'll come back. I know, you're at least one of you's on totally the other side of town, but it looks like you're in like Climate Reality Project and CCL, I think it is. Can you say more, please?
About Citizens Climate Lobby.
or the other work that you're doing. Like,
Yeah.
even with climate reality.
Oh, yeah. So first of all, we'll give talks anywhere. If you know any other groups that would like to have us, then yeah, sure. I am a member of Citizens Climate Lobby. We advocate for federal climate legislation. I'm also a member of Climate Reality, and we just recently started a subgroup of plant-rich eating subgroup. And so I provide recipes in the monthly newsletter, and we get together and eat plant-based food once in a while. And we encourage people to host plant-based meals at their homes, invite family, and also reach out and invite people that you've never socialized with before. I don't know, I watched this movie called Join or Die, which I would recommend to anyone. And it's about how we need to develop community for the sake of our democracy. Anna, would you like?
Yeah. And so I am part of Nicola's Climate Reality Plant-Rich Eating group. And one other thing that Nicola and I have done recently is we donated a couple of plant-based dinner parties for fundraisers. And so that got a couple of people who otherwise wouldn't have thought about plant-based eating to throw a plant-based dinner party. And it turned out to be really fun and led to some good conversations. So that's a fun thing that we've done. And we're just always looking for opportunities to kind of get the message out there. We don't have websites or anything like that yet. But you're welcome to come along on any of those things.
So we recently got turned on to the idea of veganuary. Have you heard? Yeah, veganuary started in England, right? Becoming a big thing in Europe. And I read that like in the subway stations in France, there are these huge posters everywhere and essentially say, the only problem you'll have is going back to eating meat. So, are you getting a sense that this is catching on here as well?
I wish I could say that. It feels like we're fighting the big ag and the animal agriculture, the whole message about you need more protein and all that crazy stuff. You need whey protein powder. And I think that I heard that bloggers got paid $40 million last year by animal agriculture companies to promote all this nonsense about how you need more protein and animal protein specifically. So yeah, it really feels like right now we're fighting an uphill battle in the United States. The rest of the world, I think, has definitely gone there. I have a friend who spent a lot of time in Denmark, and she said that all of the professors at universities who teach about sustainability, that they have to tell their students that they're completely plant-based, even if it's not true, because otherwise the students will be so outraged. And so, I mean, of course, they eat very little meat, if they do, but that's kind of how strict some of the younger people are in other parts of the world. Do you have other things you want to say?
I will say that in the Twin Cities, there's a big plant-based vegan community here. So I don't feel isolated or strange or different. You know, you can get involved as little or as much as you want, and it can be just social and fun. Obviously, last weekend we had the Veg Fest, which was thousands of people came along to that. We have the Vegan Chef Challenge through August, and we're just starting to organize one for January to correspond to Veganuary. And we encourage restaurants to put a new vegan dish on their menu. And then we encourage all the vegans and other people we know to try out those dishes, and then people vote, and it's a competition to find the best dish. I will say that in the UK, if you open a newspaper and you see an advert of a grocery store, half the page might be meat or other products, and the other half is plant-based products. So they're coming along leaps and bounds in Europe. So we don't need to feel like we're trudging through this on our own. There are lots of people on board.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. If you want us to talk with other people about our choices, our journey, I'm wondering about the best language to use. If you say, I can think of an example when I was organizing a Thanksgiving potluck, and one person offered a vegan dinner and a vegetarian said, "Oh, that's going too far." I think this was many years ago. She, may not be valid anymore, but when you say vegan, people think of it as deprivation. And I appreciated your message that you don't have to change all at once. You can work toward this gradually. And why, the reasons why are very, very clear. But how do we get others to make that jump?
Oh, you may have noticed that a lot of times people use the term plant-based rather than vegan. So that's a little more positive, maybe? I don't know. It doesn't carry some of the baggage that vegan has. But I think talking about how delicious the food is and how, as Nicola says, it is an adventure. It opens your, going down that path. You're not leaving anything behind other than maybe 3 foodstuffs. And you're opening the door to so many other foods that are delicious to eat that you maybe hadn't thought of before.
Okay, so we have to make clear that we're not being judgmental about anything. We can have just plant-rich diets. We can be reducetarian. I can honestly say that I do not feel that I'm missing out on anything by not eating animal products. The food I eat is delicious. And of course, with the fake meats that are available nowadays, you can have something that tastes just the same as a meat-containing dish. So, I guess I try to just make that point that it's not really a sacrifice, I don't think.
So I know you are both amazing home cooks, but do you have a favorite plant-based restaurant meal?
Ooh. Only one?
Your most favorite.
Right. Oh.
Reverie. Reverie is a plant-based restaurant in Minneapolis. It's fabulous. Everything I've eaten there is fantastic. There is a chain of the restaurant, I can't remember the chain, that's the How and the Block and Stanley's. They have a variety. So this is where I go with my family. They have a lot of vegan burgers and fake chicken and things like that. And so I would recommend that for people as a starting point.
Yeah, and my absolute favorite. So I've lived in Asia for a while, and I love Asian food. So my favorite these days is a vegetarian Vietnamese restaurant that's in Minnetonka, and I can't even tell you the name of it.
Tan Luang.
Thank you. And so my family goes there like every few weeks. They know us there. And so that's my favorite. And I'm working my way through the menu because everything is delicious.
So we did just have the Vegan Chef Challenge throughout August, and the winners were announced at the Veg Fest last weekend. And the winner was Namaste, which is it North Minneapolis? Okay, and then second came Reverie, and third was Food on the Fly, which is in the Skyway. So they all have delicious plant-based food.
Okay, here's a question. Have you tried a raw food diet?
I have not.
It's they have meetups about it. I went to a meetup some years ago, but have you tried it?
I haven't tried it as a whole diet, but sometimes I think in Miami I've been to like a raw food cafe, and maybe in Las Vegas too. And the food at those cafes is really delicious.
It's really good.
Yeah. But no, I haven't tried it as a.
Yeah, you need a
beyond a
dehydrator
meal.
and, and some kitchen equipment, but yeah, just don't go below 100 and don't go above 108.
Yeah.
And
Is
so
that-
it's slower dehydrating, but you can make, like I used to make all these croquettes and things, like Indian food they have a lot of different burger thingies, croquette things and mixtures, samosas. Yeah. But it's good. It's a good one.
It's an adventure, right? You can try all these things that you hadn't thought about before.
If there's no other questions, I had a whole list of questions. I didn't want to dominate the conversation, but I hear what you're saying, and a lot of this has been geared at personal action. And I've also heard it said, in fact, at the Veg Fest, we went to hear some of the speakers, that it's going to take more than just, individual action collectively adds up. And we've really pushed that within this congregation. But ultimately, what kind of food system do we want to see, and how do we get there? So that's kind of the general framework of my question. And then within that, very specifically, the idea of rewilding, restoring the ecology, recreating reforesting, recreating the grasslands. As an ecology biology nerd who loves to garden, that is right down my alley. But I'm also aware that people that own the land, and I'm not talking about public lands, the public grazing land, but the people that own land, they need to make a living off of it. How do we push our agenda on that? How can they make a living short of raising animals, and how do they transition to something else and put some other land back into natural plantings?
I don't have all the answers, obviously, but one thing that we can do is right now, the US government subsidizes crop insurance. And so what that does is that pushes some of this marginal land into production that doesn't need to be there. And so this is not like the main part of somebody's farm. This means that they've got, some side 40 that they otherwise would have left fallow, but because they can get subsidized crop insurance, they can plant stuff there. And if it doesn't grow, they still make money. So eliminating the subsidized crop insurance would certainly be a way to push some of the more marginal land out of production. And so that's just one thing. Mm-hmm. But then I think we'll also just have to get creative. this land that's in production now, it hasn't been in production, for all of time. At some point, it was natural land, and somebody took it over. And transitions take some creativity, but I think we're up for the challenge.
Yeah, I just feel like so much of this is the big agribusiness, the Cargills, et cetera, that are driving the agenda with their huge deep pockets. The Conservation Reserve Program is supposed to do what you say, let that marginal land be converted to wetlands or whatever. And, those are all in the Farm Bill, and they haven't passed a Farm Bill in 3 years now. 3 years, I think that's right. So, I don't know. It's hard not to be discouraged.
Yeah, so this is kind of related to that. So is there any legislation coming up or that's happening, or how can we find out about it that we can, what can we do to push that forward? I don't even know how to find out what the legislation is that might be coming.
Yeah. I don't know a ton. I know that Cory Booker at the federal level is very interested in these issues, and he goes around even though he's I think a member of Congress. I don't remember if he's in Congress. He's a senator from New Jersey, but he still travels around the U.S. to talk to farmers and to try to come up with legislation that ultimately can be bipartisan. I think in today's environment, we've got to sit tight for a couple of years, but yeah. And actually, Anna, maybe you have ideas about this.
Are you familiar with the Land Stewardship Project? I rely a lot on them, and that's a source of information. They have a land stewardship project. They actually started back in the 80s when there was a farm. There was drought and everything else, and a lot of farms were going under, and they work for the smaller farms, the family farms, as opposed to the big mega ones. So.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just going to say one thing before I hand it over to Nicola. I would say just call your representatives too and say that it matters to you. So, for Minnesota, our senators are both on the Ag Committee, and so just saying that this matters to you, even if you don't have specific legislation in mind, they need to hear our voices, because right now they're hearing a lot from the big ag.
Cory Booker is also on the Ag Committee, so they're hearing it from him too, to be more, move towards more sustainable farming and get rid of factory farms and things like that. Obviously, factory farms, CAFOs, they receive a lot of subsidies. So can those subsidies be put towards rewilding areas instead of towards producing a lot of cheap meat that, obviously isn't cheap in the long run? It's artificially cheap at the moment. So the other thing I want to say is that until there's a big groundswell of people, politicians aren't going to do anything. So we have to start the movement with our own personal changes and speaking up before politicians will do anything. That's my general belief about anything, how politics works, when it does work.
Yeah, you hold on to it.
I haven't been in the room, but you know about 5 calls, right?
Yes.
The app 5 calls.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Do you want to share one? No?
Time together.
No.
Well, I suppose it's time to say thank you.
I want to thank Abigail for organizing this whole event and inviting us to speak.
Yay. And you want to do a closing? Elena will do a little closing for us.
Though we extinguish the light of the chalice here, we know that the light of truth and the warmth of love go with us in our hearts.
We didn't burn the church down.